We really enjoyed the presentations. They were imaginative and creative. We thought we had wonderful potential for future technologies for books. We have a few questions and thoughts on your presentations, and we open the dialogue now to a question and answer session that will become a conversation, and we encourage our audience to join us as we speculate these ideas and concepts and engage in an interactive dialogue now. The first question I'd like to ask, since we were just speaking about it, is of the adaptive group. My concern is that this technology could create lazy readers. I think of the times when I was younger and I was reading Pride and Prejudice, and they spoke in a very different vernacular than we do today. They didn't have LOL and BRB. Their language was difficult, and I think it raised my vocabulary to a different level. I think it's because I knew maybe 99% of the words in a sentence more, but not one word. I had to force raise my reading level and thus expand my vocabulary. Do you worry at all that with this future technology that readers will become lazy and depend on their technology to explain things to them?
Well, ideally it would be something where the book is actually smart enough to you can either program the reading level or at least the age of the child to get an idea. So you'd have a jumping off point, and then it wouldn't actually change if it hears the child missing one or two words. It would change if the child's missing several words and missing kind of the context. So then it would actually go in before that and be able to say maybe go back and reread that sentence, use that reading strategy, or why don't you go back and look at the pictures. It's not going to just hand you what you want just to make it easier. It would kind of scaffold the experience.
Another question I have for the adaptive group is, what is your thoughts on a business model where you're basically taking one text and adapting it several times, and there may be several editors involved? What are your thoughts on how the cost of the value add would then?
Well, I think that obviously raises bigger questions that the other groups would probably want to touch on too, but it asks the question of who's in charge of making content decisions or editing or changing future iterations of something. And we've discussed it, and we really think, again, this is me, us, that's something that kind of left up to situations. So, for example, Michelle Silverstein didn't allow his books to be printed in any form other than hardcover with really nice paper, and that was his decision to make, and so the publishers obviously followed his wishes. But there might be other situations where, again, if we're developing a book that would be content adaptive, and somebody would have to decide how to maintain that zone of proximal development that helps children learn but not be too challenging or too easy for them. And so you might involve multiple people. So the role of author versus user, and then editor, and adapter, and educator, and psychologist, these could all be one person, or these could be a team. And so it's something that, rather than becoming prescriptive about how this should be done, I think it's more about opening up and saying who can play what role here.
Yeah, that also gives me an example of the graphic novel Persepolis by Marjan Kutrafi. She wrote that graphic novel by herself. It is autobiography, and 7 years later they made it into a movie. She is the director of the movie, but somebody else is collaborating with her who made the movie. So I guess we need more writers and more collaboration towards new book. So we'll have more people getting involved in the whole act of writing and producing books.
I'd like to ask a question just to switch up to the immersive team, because one thing I'm concerned about with taking a book, which is sort of an inward experience, you're always drawn into the sort of page itself, and the book has its own gravity, and kind of reversing the polarity of that gravity by making the book social, making the book tell you about things outside of itself, and sort of pointing you in directions away from, the actual text. And I'm wondering if you see that as an issue or a sort of a problem, and how you might sort of mediate that concern in a sort of more socially adaptive book.
What? Do you want to?
Yeah. Are you talking about how sort of intruding upon the reading experience?
Yeah, how it sort of it would seem to break up the reading experience by suggesting, why don't you go grab a cup of coffee, and then or this and that, just suggesting alternatives to the reading that you're actually doing while you're reading.
Yeah, and most of those notifications are in a separate portion of the book. A big part of this experience is that the user has control can tailor how they want that information available to them. And also into the circle of that, as the user is changing those settings and controlling that, the book is also adapting to what the user, and other books that the user reads, adapting to what their book preferences there are. So those notifications come, they don't interrupt the reading experience. They're outside of that the user can access when they're ready to. It also does notify them of things when they're doing other activities.
So we noticed that if the person stopped reading for a while, and to bring the person back to the text, that's when these notifications will show up. It's not something that while you're reading, exactly when you are at the Mad Hatter's tea party, that it suddenly suggests, oh, why don't you go have some tea here?
Mm.
It's something that's beyond that, but at the same time it connects you back to the text, and we see that as beneficial.
We never see it actually interrupting you in the process of reading. Like if the actual document of the book is open, then it wouldn't happen. And I think it's interesting to say that reading is totally a private experience, because I think it can be both. And I mean, people form book clubs anyway, and it's hard once you get to a certain point in your life, if you move somewhere new, it's like if you don't already have a set group of people if you want that social experience, it's hard to find it maybe. And so like it would give people an opportunity to find that in the area where they are without having to do too much work. But it wouldn't, it's never a requirement. It's never like, oh, did you complete this activity? Sorry, then you can't keep reading. Like if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But if you're the type of reader who wants that, you can have it.
To piggyback on your saying that reading is a social experience, as a director of a library, I'm very, this idea of, having smells in books, like, how does that translate into my library? Do I have to have like the stinky room? Or so how do you translate that for reading in public and the appropriateness of that?
Well, a lot of times I think it's like with any book, you have the freedom to read it anywhere you like. So it's less about us creating books, but more about people deciding and using their own judgment to find good places to read these books. So to have a dedicated room might actually be nice. It's kind of like if you're on the subway, people have MP3 players and they're just blasting them wildly, and that's to their own discretion. And we think the smell experience would be something of a similar sort, where hopefully the people are using with great power, great responsibility, and so using it at their own disclosure to be more.
Well, before you alter, everybody poops. We might make sure that the etiquette for this technology is honed down.
It's also, to add on what Mark said, it could be, like you said, it could be glass half empty, but also glass half full. Let's say you're on the subway and you get a whiff of a beautiful flower and you look over and you see that somebody is reading a certain book that has that smell. What?
The Orchid Thief.
The Orchid Thief, or something like that. So it can also engage other people in getting their attention towards the book.
And on the same notion, this book could be used maybe in classrooms and places where you want to encourage social reading. So you'd have a book that has a smell, and then maybe everyone can get involved.
That would be my follow-up, would be what would the scope be of this sort of book? So what types of books do you plan to include in this sort of thing? Do you think this does not fit so well? What genres or types of books don't fit with classes?
We definitely don't think that this book would replace all existing books, and that there is a place for those books and these. But we look at them more as, just as a book is adapted into a movie or something like that. This book is, it could be a toy, like you saw with, like something to play with, like the Pringles book that we showed an example of. It's just maybe I'm not sure what genre, but it's books where you really require, where you require an additional sense added to.
And I think we don't want to get ahead of ourselves and start limiting our genres just yet. I think it is open to interpretation, and I think that's kind of the exciting part about where we are in this cultural and timeline context.
I'd like to